Hey everyone, welcome to this episode of The Upgrade. I'm super excited to have with me Pete Pachal, who is the founder and CEO of Media Copilot. Pete and I have been teaching an awesome course. We are at the very end of our first cohort of the AI upgrade for PR and media pros. It's a 6-week course. That's a bit of a disclaimer. We'll also be talking about it today quite a bit because, we really have some great insights from working with, 25 field leading PR and media pros. And helping them sort of navigate this crazy landscape of AI. And, there are new tools coming out in between every class, Pete. But we have been doing our best to turn around and, learn the tools, teach the tools, help co-create some best practices with our students. And I can't wait to dive in and talk through, this really awesome and exciting moment in time at the intersection of AI and media.
Yeah, absolutely. It's great to see you, Peter. Thanks for getting together to do this. I know usually we're in a course, teaching together to an audience. It's like rarely do we ever get a chance to chat outside of course stuff. So this is pretty fun. How is it going? How have you been finding the course so far?
It's been a blast. Yeah, I've really enjoyed, the opportunity to have one-on-ones with students. I have had two today. I've had a few yesterday. I love being able to, meet with everyone individually and hear about, where they are personally as well as where their organizations are at this moment in time with, everything from whether they have an AI policy to how they're planning to leverage a lot of the stuff that we've been throwing at them in class for their own actual workflows. And so, yeah, I've been building some GPTs today with students for everything from, op-ed outline and drafting to, many other things.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a great thing about the course is that you're not going to get overwhelmed, but we get to some pretty cutting edge stuff pretty quickly. I think the challenge with these is there's varied levels of AI knowledge on the part of the students. But I think we do a pretty good job of balancing that because there's a lot you can do with the tools that are off the shelf. Like most folks, I think, in my experience anyway, are sort of kind of not quite stuck, but are maybe mentally stuck a bit in terms of chatting with ChatGPT and getting some output here and there. But once you develop better habits, you can really uncork a whole level of interactivity and functionality that is just beneath that surface. And it doesn't take a lot, but it does take some deliberate dedication and some guidance, which obviously is what we provide.
Yeah, totally. I think one of the things that I found most interesting is just how many people have said to me in our one-on-ones, like, I wish I had discovered XYZ tool sooner or come to your class a month earlier. Well, this is the first time we've done the class, so it couldn't have. But, people, for example, are building media lists with Perplexity Deep Research now, which, came out in between, literally 3 days before the unit on influencer identification and outreach that we had planned. And so we scrapped our curriculum, quickly started going down the rabbit hole of playing with, this new tool and, built an awesome use case and demo, gave it to students, and some of them had just done this and spent weeks, right? And we, in a few days, created a demo for them and a roadmap so that it can take, less than a day, frankly, and maybe even less than an hour, right? If you're using the right prompts, the right tools. So I love that. I love those light bulb moments going off and having students come back and in the one-on-one AI coaching session saying, I found this so exciting. How can you help me tailor it and build something even better just for my upcoming project, for our, internal processes?
Yeah, I got to say, the deep research lesson was such a great example of the advantage of doing this live. Because all of the classes are live and we're teaching kind of in real time with AI, so to speak. So we were able to do that, right? Like if you have an on-demand course, which are fine, of course, there's a lot of great on-demand courses, but you're going to get something that's probably at least a few months old and maybe even 6 months or a year old. And honestly, in AI time, that's an eternity. And I got to say, one of the biggest changes in all the teaching I've been doing in the last few months is the integration of deep research. And deep research is such a massively useful tool, especially for PR. Like, one of the biggest use cases I think that comes up, it's probably come up for you in a lot of courses you teach, is like list generation, right? It actually comes up in like industry stats. There's a muckrack report that we cite all the time, and it has a lot of good industry stats in it. What are you using AI for? And research and list generation is near the top of that list. And it's hard. So if you just do raw chat GPT for this, or just your generic perplexity search that, was available since perplexity, like you could do something, you get a little bit, but usually you get some outdated stuff. And it's like obvious stuff, and you got to get really elaborate with your prompts. And there are dedicated tools that obviously do this probably a little better, but those tend to be expensive, very narrowly focused. You're sort of restricted to a platform, and a lot of people, like, part of doing a course like this is avoiding that. So the amazing integration of deep research, which again, it only come out like not even a week before we did that class, and being able to do that list generation exercise, and watch it sort of happen before everyone's eyes in an hour-long class. Not only like it wasn't just light bulbs, man. I felt like it was like a constellation of ideas. Like, holy cow, this is going to save me so much work. Now, all that said, I don't want to like make it to be the second coming. Like, there's always a certain amount of human in the loop, which is something we obviously drive into people. Like, the output and the detail of output you get from deep research is markedly better, but it doesn't negate the human equation, right? That's the thing we say in every lesson. It's like, look, there are key parts of the process where you still need to be involved. And that it's a fundamental, but it's a very important level setting fundamental we would do in the first class of like, the output is sort of stage one, and then you sort of take over and you need that human judgment, the human, and even the editing process and everything. And AI can accelerate all this, but it doesn't replace you. But again, like, the fact that that specific use case is now something that is greatly accelerated than it was in November, just a huge difference for PR audiences.
Yeah, absolutely. Augment, not replace is definitely the mantra that we have at the upgrade and yeah, in our courses together, Pete. And I think that it's amazing what you can do already with tools, that are virtually, they're cheap, $20 a month, right? And most students come in maybe, yeah, with a free version of ChatGPT. Typically, there's obviously a whole spectrum, but a lot of times, once they do start paying for a Perplexity or a ChatGPT, then, through a lot of the best practices that we try to impart, in real time, people get so much more mileage out of the tools and realize there's so much more they can do. One of my favorite examples too of us, yeah, sort of really addressing this specific student population is, I remember when I was an intern at Fleischman Hillard in, big comms PR environment, I was drafting cold outreach emails, right, all day, every day. And your GPT for Sheets demo and lesson blew me away even. And, it's fun to teach this together with you because we both have sort of different backgrounds and strengths in terms of the types of tools that we play with, but the ability to suddenly apply a prompt across an entire list of contacts and auto generate and even put those drafts into my Gmail folder, right, for hundreds of outreach emails at once is incredible. I mean, that just blew me away, and that was one of my personal favorite lessons that you led.
Yeah. Man, the GPT for Sheets one, I really love teaching the lesson because it's a great, for people who haven't done it, like doing AI beyond the chat box, right? Because we're all used to thinking of AI as almost like this replacement for Google. You go here, but instead of a list of links, I get an answer. And while that's true, it's only the beginning. And so there's a couple fundamental lessons. One of them is like, hey, you can actually take that experience and put it somewhere else and use the tools you're already familiar with AI in these bridging technologies. And GPT for Sheets, which also, it's done by GPT for Work. They do one for Excel too. So if you're a spreadsheet guru, that is like I would say it's kind of a must download. And there's alternatives too. But anyway, the point is the idea of like, oh, I can bring generative functionality and content within a spreadsheet. I don't have to go to ChatGPT to do that anymore. And I can, or Claude or whatever. And you, by the way, you can use any AI, like it's API driven. So if you can even use DeepSeek if you wanted to, just as long as you have an API code, you can throw that into your GPT for Sheets and away you go. And then, like I say, I'm not really a spreadsheet guru. I kind of became one a little bit when I was doing more finance stuff at CoinDesk, but like I don't live in Excel, right? I all the formulas I've ever learned are by watching YouTube videos and reading stuff online. Like, oh, I need to do this if then thing in a sheet. And I got to say, like, deriving the content is fun. Translating, you can do all that within the spreadsheet. The absolute best thing for me was like, oh, I can actually natural language how to do a formula. Like, because otherwise you're spending hours like looking at stuff and like, okay, walking through the YouTube video. Do I put the if thing here? Where's the comma go? Is it important I put a space? And no, it just comes up with it. You just, I just want to put this here and I want to make sure it's, done by the time of day, and I want to incorporate conversion rates, today's conversion rates, and you can do all that in natural language, and it'll just, here's the formula, plop it in, boom, done. And it's like, thank you. I could have saved literally weeks of work in working out like budget documents months ago. Just yeah, that alone is like such a productivity unlock. So yeah, like it really gets people's minds going, and I think that is a bridge to doing even more with the chatbots themselves. And I'm thinking specifically about like custom GPTs, which I think is sort of an essential part of anyone's journey with AI is like thinking of AI. I just talked about putting AI within an app, and custom GPT is like the first major step to developing your own AI apps.
Yeah, that's a great way of thinking about it, right? And having an AI assistant that is tailored to your own workflows and projects and clients, even, right, is the future, right? And the future is now in many ways, right? We are able to, in all the classes that we teach, like by the end of it, like people really see that with AI, with our humanities backgrounds, for example, right? If we're coming from, media, it's oftentimes, really overwhelming to think like, oh, code my own apps. Like, what are you smoking? Like, come on. But now at the end of the course, a lot of people are like, holy crap, yeah, I can actually build my own tools and tech stack, just as you mentioned, with natural language, right? A couple sentences. And, with the right planning and strategy, you can have an entire fleet, of AI assistants in GPT form, for example, within ChatGPT that are, tailor made for my exact client projects, and that's mind-blowing. It saves so much time, and love seeing those exciting light bulb moments with the one-on-ones and in class, of course.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you can kind of essentially, I don't want to say scale too much, but it is kind of what we're talking about here. Like, you only have so much time and attention and what you might call cognitive labor that you can do in the course of a day. And, we've all agonized over crucial emails. And I'm not saying that's going to go away, but I would say that the number of those crucial emails you can do will increase. And certainly the number of less crucial emails will vastly increase. But, think of all the steps that it took to get to a crucial email that you're agonizing over, the research, not just on the topic, but maybe on the person that you're pitching, right? That's a very common thing, obviously, in media relations. You got to personalize these pitches, you got to have relationships. That's never going to change. But the thing is, you only were able to have so many of those relationships because of the limitations of what it would take to sort of invest in that. And now, by sort of scaling up a lot of the research around the person, the publication, the topics you have, you can essentially get more out of your own efforts, right? So I think this addresses one of the things that I found to be a through line in the class, especially when we surveyed them from the beginning, that there's a lot of existential dread out there about
Yeah.
jobs. Like it's like, okay, I'm in PR. I understand it's knowledge work. I also understand AI is really, really good at knowledge work. So what's going to happen? And I think a lot of people come to the class with this in mind. Like if we're being honest, they're a little worried, right? They're like, I need to brush up on my
Hmm.
skills, and that's true. But I think once you start to really use these tools, you sort of realize, oh, I get it. Like my job is still like people still need to do media relations. That's a people profession. It's just that now by using these tools, what I'm able to do in a day is going to be 10%, 15%, 20%, and maybe even more the more you use them as you attach them to more of your process. And so at every sort of step of the way, in a typical whatever you're doing, whether you're doing something for earned media, whether you're doing your own content or whatever, you start to think about what how can AI collaborate with this, and then once AI is part of that process, what is repeatable in that? And then that leads you to like, now here beyond just going to a chat box and getting some output, there's something a little more advanced where I can actually have a lot of this pre-made. And of course, that's where I was going with the custom GPTs. And then if you go even beyond that, because we don't stop there, because there's automations and sort of some very specific things you can do with various platforms that will, like we just mentioned, GPT for Sheets, like spreadsheets are just a database, and databases are very easy to connect things to. And so you can easily put things into Sheets and get things out of Sheets with no code whatsoever, and putting generative stuff at any of those places, including within the sheet, that will suddenly turn, a 5 email day into a 50 email day, if that's what you're doing. So yeah, just a lot that you can do, and then realize that your job's not gone, it's just augmented, as you said.
Yeah, definitely. I think that we've had students come through and realize that a lot of what they're doing is not human work, right? That said, a lot of what they're doing is and will be irreplaceable, as you mentioned. But this is a theme that comes up in a lot of our courses at the upgrade, is like once people come through and see, a few hours worth of demos and what's possible with the best in class tools, right? Their heads explode to a degree, right? And they start to think really meta level. And I encourage them to really explore that of what do you want to be spending time doing? What is the best use of your human, judgment and experience and relationships and knowledge? And what are the things that you really don't like doing? Yeah, but are critical, right? And how do we figure out, how to map out your job responsibilities or teams or roles and, adapt to the AI age that we're in, right? And this is what I love doing with clients for consulting, for example, is really having a bit more of a strategic advising session and thinking about, where is your team's time best spent now with these tools. Because I remember when I was first getting into PR as an intern, like almost my entire role now, Pete, at that point could be done by AI, all of it, literally all of it, right? From the research and the pitch drafting and the social post generation, and it's pretty amazing what's possible. And it does beg questions about what is sort of the inroads to PR or media or whatever, like comms, for recent grads, right? Like this, a lot of this sort of essential roll your sleeves up drafting and research and stuff is really important to understand how the industry works, right? How the job works. And so this is something that comes up too, is, how do we get people ready from 0 to 1 to come into the industry anymore? And it's not just for, media, it's every field now, right? Like junior developers, junior, whatever, first entry level rung positions suddenly look very different, I think, in this new world.
For sure. And I think there's a lot of reimagining of what jobs are. And again, I think one of the points of taking a course like this is to kind of start figuring that out on your own, as opposed to waiting for either your industry or even your company to tell you, because there's always a chance that won't be news that you like, right? And again, we there's in that report, that Muckrack report we were talking about, there is this notable gap between the number of people actually using AI. So it's like 3/4 of PR people now use AI regularly, which I think that's probably most industries now. Like ChatGPT, it's free. You don't even have to sign in anymore. Like it's just providing answers. So naturally, people are using it, at least at that level. But there's also only about I'd say I think it's about 40% of PR firms actually have some kind of AI policy, which tells you like most of them are probably doing this in a pretty ad hoc way and are still kind of in perpetual experimental mode, right? So, within that gap, I think there's a lot of figuring out to do. And like I said, don't wait. Like, don't wait for someone else to figure this out for you. Figure out what AI can do for you today by, just diving in and you started applying, start breaking down your tasks. What can I apply to this and that? Again, obviously our course is a great way to sort of get some guidance on that. But to give a bit of a, not quite a spoiler or a freebie of it, I think the biggest thing that I think everyone who wants to use AI more should do is really start thinking about it not just as something that gives you output, but as like a collaborator. Like, you talked about the pipeline problem, right? Like that's what you were talking about with like, oh, what if this can do 90 to 100% of an intern's job better? What is both an organization and even an intern job look like then? And there's different points of view on that. Personally, I think as these organizations think about this, and I've advised a few on this before, like you're going to need to take a certain percentage of stuff that could be done by AI and leave it as human because you need that sort of training. So if you have like say 10 clients, like to make sure your interns are getting up to speed, maybe one or two of them you don't use this sort of basic AI stuff and you train the interns by doing that. That's one point of view you could sort of do on an organizational level. But honestly, AI could probably help you figure out how to do this better. Like that's like one idea, like use it as a collaborator in both yourself and your organization and just sort of bounce ideas off it. Like here's what I'm thinking. Here are the challenges that AI is presenting to my organization. How would you, AI, solve this? And you'll probably get some good stuff, particularly if you give them more data, because that's obviously another big fundamental lesson. The more AI knows about you and your organization, the better it's going to help. And not just in terms of producing output, although that's a big part of it, is like, oh, I understand your strategic goals. I understand your challenges, your finances, your business model. Here are the, AB3, 1, 2, 3 things you should do to make sure that you're getting the most out of going down this path.
Yeah, that's a great distinction to, Media Copilot is such a perfect name for this, right? Actually approaching AI as a thought partner, a strategic advisor, a colleague, a collaborator, bouncing ideas off. This is all part of having an AI first mentality, which is critical, in 2025 and beyond, right? We're not getting around it. We have to go through it and sort this out. And yeah, I think your message about understanding it before others do in your industry or organization, right, is going to be critical to make sure that you're empowered, right, to make decisions and to not be sort of at the whims of others as this disruption continues to unfold. And it's in every industry, right? I mean, there's some research, there's a whole, podcast from the New York Times Hard Fork about this, AI in medicine, right? Like it's coming for everyone, right? ChatGPT outperformed doctors in diagnostics, right? This is coming for all type of knowledge work, right? Regardless of the field. So we are not alone in this in PR and media is what I'm saying, right? This is a sort of workforce level, societal level disruption that is unfolding.
Yeah, and I think when you think about what your job looks like with AI, and honestly, just kind of as you think about your job and the people you answer to, whether it's your company or the industry, you want to show that you're AI savvy, and that's obvious. But being AI savvy doesn't mean just I know I've got all these apps and I have these use cases, although that obviously is huge. But it is also like I also know what AI is not good at. Okay. And I understand what I do when AI is essentially a coworker. That's important. You got to be aware of the weaknesses of AI. It still hallucinates. It's inherent to the technology. I mean, I don't think as good as and sophisticated as these systems are getting, hallucinations are never going to go away 100%. I guess I probably should never say never, but it's just so clear that, AI, there's massive databases, there's a lot of things they have to process. Humans get confused sometimes. It's only natural that AI would too. And it makes dumber mistakes because of the nature of it. It has no experience with the real world, et cetera. But we go over all this. But it is like, oh, okay. I would say the unsophisticated point of view on that is that, oh, it's useless. We can't use it. You know, that's wrong. So obviously, like, no, it's useful and you can use it. You just have to understand that limitation and build your processes around it. And also be aware of like how often does it screw up depending on the task, right? Like we draw distinctions between different kinds of tasks in the course, and like some of these are high risk in terms of hallucination, some are a little lower risk. But again, there's always that risk, and figuring out how those specific use cases slot into specific workflows. And once you sort of really break it down, you can sort of say, okay, here's where we can scale. Here's where we can like let it do its thing, because a lot at this other juncture on this process, a human's looking at it. But it can do a lot of stuff up till then. And so that's kind of really like, you need to be able to sort of map this out and really kind of like get a good feel for obviously what AI can do and what it can't, and the outputs of the various models, right? Like we give a lot of advice on this in the class about, oh, Claude's kind of good at writing, ChatGPT is kind of good at general purpose stuff, Perplexity obviously good at search, but also surprisingly good at a few other things. Here's what thinking models do, and here's why some are maybe not necessarily better, but at least more transparent, and some still kind of are better, but that's a little bit, up in the air right now. So even taking all that into account and the workflows that sort of match, you can almost imagine a diagram of like, with like lines between them. This could be good at that and that. You can start on your own linking like, oh, this thing that I did before, there's a process in here where AI can either take it from me and do some really cool stuff with it, or even get me to this point so that I've got something better or at least more of it. And, that's what it's all about. But it does take that AI first mentality, and then just a little bit of time, not too much time, 6 hours over 6 weeks, perhaps, to sort of get to know some of these systems specific to the work they're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that even in, let's take, for example, crisis management and response, right? There's a whole stack now that exists to be able to, model that, sort of gamify, think about, not only how to react in the moment with sort of an AI advisor that contextually understands sort of the landscape and has live internet access, but also, maybe sort of, having a little bit of scenario planning, automations and assistance. And I love the example of Mirror Pete. I hope I'm not showing our cards here too much, but
No, do it.
Mirror Pete is one of my favorite examples that we've incorporated in class, and I think it's really a cool example to just dive into a little bit here as well, because you've taken something that there's an entire sort of field and governing set of expectations and principles around, and AIified it. Tell us about Mirror Pete, Pete.
Well, Mirror Pete was an idea that you and I had as we were crafting the material in the course, because we wanted to have a lesson on crisis management leading to media training, right? Because obviously in a crisis, it's very important to get messaging out quickly, but there will likely be hostility in terms of the well, at least the interviewing process, but the media attention, and so it's something that has to be navigated very carefully. It's essential that the people involved are trained properly. And what that means is, there's a lot of mock interviews that go on. Many PR people are very familiar with that, but there's only so many of these you can do, and so many things you can sort of wrap into a session. Well, now with AI, you can develop media training tools that are fully informed about not just, the particular crisis you're talking about, but also media relations and like what makes a good interview from both the journalist and the PR perspective. And so you can bring all that knowledge into a customized tool and also make it multimodal, right? That's the other big thing. You can go like, okay, not only can I have this thing that knows everything, it can verbally ask you questions in the tone and voice of your choosing. And you could even take it a level up and have it visual, you know? So that's basically what we did. We created a media trainer who looks and sounds a lot like me, and maybe even in my home office here, to ask people, like basically act as a media training tool. And so there's several levels of this. Like I said, it's, you know, one, you go from text to verbal to interactive and to and visual, depending on what tools you use. But it's a great tool, I think, for media relations even outside of a crisis. And there's other sort of crisis type stuff we talk about too in terms of the research and whatever around that. But the important thing is sort of thinking about AI as this thing that will obviously go beyond the chat, but also is the educational aspect of AI, which is sort of taking the collaborator to almost a different level and creating even more complex interactions with that, with special instructions, right? So this is where, you know, it gets into more advanced use. It's like, I want a collaborator, but I also want to someone who's going to challenge me in certain scenarios, and that could be contingent. Like in the trainer, it's like, you know, it's normal until you ask it to do the simulation, then it does its thing and it comes back. But I've developed other, and I'm sure you have too, of like sort of these collaborative bots that aren't just there to honestly be sycophantic and please me, which is like most AI right now.
Yeah,
Like
out
you
of the
have to
box.
like explicitly give it instructions. No, challenge me. Make sure I'm, you know, not straw manning things and all this stuff. You know, like you can do that. Like AI, it's like, okay, I'm not gonna just sit back and say you're right. Oh, this is so great. You're doing awesome, AI user. Like that's like a lot. Like okay, don't butter me up. Like actually help me. And then again, it takes some training and some specific instructions, but 100% doable. And now more people should do it. Honestly.
Yeah, totally. You know, you can prompt AI to be more adversarial and help you and your clients prepare for those tough interviews. And yeah, it's a pretty wild experiment. It's one of my favorite things, and it's going to continue to, I'm sure, evolve here. But the AI avatars are really fun to play
Well, I
with, and
can't
show
wait for the
students.
day where I can just send it to teach the course for me.
I
That's
mean, probably not
next
that
year's
far
course.
away in terms of possibilities, right? I mean, already the company that we use for one of those Mirror Pete avatars, HeyGen, right, has the ability to
Shout out
send
H.
your AI avatars to your Zoom meetings for you and integrate with your Google Calendar, and like begs the question, like, what the hell does the future of work look like if like potentially a Mirror Pete and Mirror Peter, can go off and handle all of our meetings because they have built in this knowledge base of all of our priorities and the context of our other projects and even our personality, and they literally kind of take on our visage and voice, and it's honestly still something I'm wrapping my head around, like
Yeah.
because even though
Well,
we're playing with it all the time, it's just like, yeah,
yeah, we're
it keeps me
joking
up at
about
night.
it. We're joking about it, but it's honestly like it's really like sort of opening up this discussion on sort of ethics around all this stuff, right? Because that's
Hmm.
another honestly common question we get beyond the existential one. It's like, okay, I'm already on board with using AI. Is this cheating? That comes up a lot. Like I'm getting it to like write stuff for me, and the answer is kind of it depends. Obviously, it really depended on use case. Like, what are you using it for? But also depends on, are you transparent? Like, depending on the use case, like maybe that's essential. Like, for example, this obviously comes up a lot in media. If you're using AI generated content in any way, that should be disclosed somewhere, either on the article or on the website. Obviously, it depends what it is, and as a we think about this. If you think of it, the entire content operation around a media brand, I mean, it's just impractical to put like disclaimers in every tweet, for example. That just wouldn't happen. But you should have guidelines for both internally and externally. So, what is your staff allowed to do versus what can your readers expect? And I think in the PR world that manifests too. Like, even I would one of the things that our students in this first cohort educated us about was that clients are starting to make specifications in the contracts they're signing, in like, okay, I want your firm to do stuff for me, but I want to make sure like you're not either using AI in this way that I don't see, or using services that I don't trust, because privacy
Yeah,
comes up in every single piece of knowledge work. Like,
of
what is
course.
the AI doing with this, with the material I'm giving it, and not just the material, but the interactions, right? And obviously, we give a lot of guidance on that. Now, we can't comprehensively look at every privacy policy, but there are some sort of fundamental concepts of using AI with data that you need to understand before you do that, because you could, there's things you can turn off, there's things you can use through a vendor or API, and then there's using AI locally. All these things are different layers of privacy, but you definitely need to understand them before you're putting up anything, not even confidential, but certainly if you're putting confidential stuff up there, but even anything sort of proprietary to your firm, just know what you're doing before you go all in on AI. But we give that guidance. So
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's also, similarly, like a risk ethically, right, of, and even just practically, of over automation, right? At the far end of the spectrum is like, not only are you, needing to sort of navigate whether to disclose, whether it's safe to input your information, proprietary, public, or otherwise, into these systems, but what happens if we rely on them too much? Where is that sort of
totally.
fine line, because as we're just talking about gen, for example, like that is possible, and this company is essentially really bullish on having our AI avatars show up for everything for us, and like there's no rules for this. We need to figure it out. And so yeah, in real time, and the only way to really do that is to play with the stuff and help facilitate a conversation in a lot of cases, right, with the really bleeding edge stuff.
Yeah, and I think developing that comfort level with, it's almost like, I don't want to scare anybody and say like you're going to become a product manager or something. But elements of that really help, like, again, I'm not saying
Totally.
you take it over, but the whole idea of like, okay, I'm using AI in this smart way and
Mm-hmm.
I'm now automated something. That's great. That does mean probably a couple months down the road, something's going to go wrong with either the AI itself, the platform, or the way you've set it up, because things change. New
Mm-hmm.
models come out, platforms evolve, et cetera. And you're going to have to revise it. You and I have built tons of stuff on no code platforms that change all the time, right? And so that doesn't mean all your work's crap. It just means you've got to be on it and tweak it a bit. So I would say, like, for the average sort of knowledge worker, creative person, not insignificant amount of time need now, wants to really unleash AI. Like, I'm not, again, this is why I don't want to scare people. It's really like, to a single digit percentage, probably like 4% of your time is now like, oh, I've got to just make sure my automations are polished here and there, and then go back to what I was doing, right? But by virtue of doing that, now that you're unlocking way more from the other like 96% of your time. But it is sort of something you kind of need to go in understanding that. Like, the AI isn't magic. In fact, our whole course is like making it non-magical. Like, like, yes,
Demystifying
there's
it.
this magical, yeah, exactly. It's like, no, really, like, you don't need to be an engineer. You don't need to be a product manager. There's so much stuff off the shelf that you can drag and drop and just use in a smart way that will unlock so much for you. Certainly way more than 5 years ago, or even like 6 months ago, really. Like, if you think about it, like, even just some of these platforms, like I was just alluding to, how easy they are. Like, I'll just say one, Zapier, right? Like, Zapier out of the box, no code, tell it you want this thing to talk to this thing and do this in this case.
Yeah.
Spend 10 minutes doing it, and you probably don't have to look at it again for like 3 to 6 months.
Yeah,
Like, amazing.
absolutely. Yeah. There's so many of these, right? No low code automation platforms or AI assistant sort of building and integrating within your tech stack, right? Where it does require some, technical exploration at least, and at least some familiarity of some of those essentials. Like, we don't really go into the weeds of things like API or technical stuff,
Oh, you
but I
don't have
think,
to. You don't have to.
yeah, that's right.
Honestly, like, it's like, maybe this is a tired analogy. I don't see it all that often, so I'm just going to say it anyway, because, like, it's like the Kramer episode where he's the movie phone guy in Seinfeld, right? Why don't you
Right.
just tell me what you want? Like, that's basically what AI is. Like,
Yep.
like, I want to do like, I want to do something in Photoshop. I was talking about GPT for Sheets or whatever. Like, just tell me what you want. Just use your natural language and I'll do it for you. Like, that's what, like, any of these, like I mentioned Zapier, it's got its own thing. Just tell me the thing you're trying to do. You want to send an email based on a search doing this other thing. Okay. Like, here are the steps. Just tweak this and this. Spend 5 minutes doing that. Good to go.
Yeah, of course, right? And so, yeah, having the ability to build and create our own AI assistants and automations using natural language is here now. And the only thing, I guess, that 4% of sort of like, the product part of it is like, well, prioritization of what to build, who to build it for, what problem does it solve, how to build it best for my organization and my workflow. Like those are the only real things, which are very simple, basic questions, right? That we can all grapple with and figure out. But those are sort of the meta level, like what to build and why, right? And then the
And I got to
rest, as you
say,
mentioned, is natural
yeah,
language now.
exactly. And I think that guidance is pretty essential, not to like, overhype ourselves or stuff, but because, and this is a fundamental thing, a lot of stuff that seems easy is not. And a lot of stuff that seems hard is easy. And what I
Yeah.
mean by, you know what I mean? Because
No,
it's like
you're right. You're
when
right.
you
Yeah.
come to some of this automation stuff, oh, if it only did this and this, and it's like, actually, that's super hard. That's, you're talking about a 27-step thing to filter this and that. But this basic part of your workflow that this relates to that you're spending a ton of time doing, actually that's really easy to automate away, you know? So
The thing that you might have thought was really hard is actually super easy. Right. Like,
yeah.
yeah.
And
And it
AI
just
is
takes
AI's
exploring.
making the harder stuff easier, but it is like there's sort of just, it's hard to explain without a use case, but there are certain fundamentals of just how the web works, right? That I think a lot of people like, it's why honestly deep research is such a transformative tool, because I think a lot of people assumed AI could do that out of the gate, and it really couldn't. It really needed that thinking layer before it could do it, and now it's here. So it's like a lot of that stuff, like we were talking about with deep research and list creation, you needed really dedicated stuff for. Well, now it can do it, right? And now that's a great example of how the AI is sort of evolving that paradigm of what's easy and hard now, and by sort of pairing that with the other sort of automation stuff, yeah, the results can be pretty amazing.
Absolutely. I know we're kind of approaching the end of this episode a bit, and let me ask you, Pete, like what do you think is something that we're gonna really be paying attention to towards the end of this year with AI in terms of PR? Like what do you think is gonna be unfolding in the next 6 months? Which I know is an insanely hard question, and I'm gonna try to answer it too. So I'm not gonna leave you out here alone. But I'm wondering what you think the future looks like at the end of this year, even with some of these ongoing changes with tools, with the models, etc. The industry.
Yeah, I'm actually gonna, I might have a boring answer to this. Like I'm supposed to say agents, right? Well, it's gonna be agents, and we're gonna be sending agents everywhere. I think agents will be a big factor. I think it's gonna be more of like how's the environment adapting to agents than people using them, right? Because people are a little worried about like agents scouring the web, and that's a problem for the stuff being scoured and the scourers. So finding what the right relationship there is something that the world's going to figure out. But I honestly don't think every PR person is going to have an agent by the end of the year. What I think is going to be sort of um, the most important thing is collaboration. And that's kind of a vague answer, but what I mean by this is like when you dive deeper into some of these AI tools, and I'll just point at some of the Teams features on various things, is that it's actually a little harder to collaborate within certain AI functions than you might think, right? And I think that's more of a symptom of the privacy concerns that a lot of people had and still have in the industry, and that are legit. But I do think the tools and the way people use tools will evolve over the next 6 months such that you can really use more AI in a collaborative way. I think people are finding creative ways to do that better and better through some either these sort of no code platforms or just sort of real time workshopping sessions with AI. I think it's going to become more of a presence in meetings and Slack rooms and that sort of thing. So I think like basically collaborating with AI is going to be more natural as things go, both on the individual and the team basis. It's kind of what I'm getting at. So if you're in a team and you all kind of work together, it's not going to be like right now. I think in most places you get a lot of people siloed into like, oh, we're using AI, but we're all using like our own ChatGPT accounts separately.
Yeah.
What I think we're going to see more of by the end of this year is like, oh, we're all in the same notebook LM, or something like that. And we're all in the same, and we can all see the chats that we're all doing. And, that's actually not quite how notebook LM works today, as you know, like it's kind of like you need to explicitly share certain things and do whatever, but and it doesn't retain certain chat history. So all of that's going to sort of get worked out as more teams use these tools. That's my big prediction for AI and PR for the rest of 2025. More, better collaboration. And I mean, more, comma, better. I do know how to speak.
The betterest collabs. Awesome. Yeah, I think your hunch is right there. All of these tools too, when they launch with just the personal plans and sort of siloed user experiences. I'm using, ChatGPT Teams, which I find to be already really helpful to have, some internal shared, AI assistants in the forms of GPTs. Would still like to see some projects actually being able to share.
Yeah, well,
With
isn't that a
like
problem, right? Like
it's a problem. It's
it's
a
not
big
as
problem.
collaborative as you think.
As soon as I made them, so it's funny, and it's not clear in a lot of these tools, at their current states, like when you purchase a Teams plan for any of them, because I've done it for a bunch of them to try them out. I was expecting when I created these projects, dumped in all of our resources for our shared courses, right? For example, each course had its own project in ChatGPT, and I was like expecting my colleagues to be able to see them and use them, and I was like, yeah, I created these projects, and I'm like, what are you talking about? No, there's nothing there. And so eventually, once that happens, bets are off. It's going to be, I can't wait,
Well,
it's going to
honestly,
be
this
really
is a
fun.
nice. I know there's some enterprise platforms that probably do a little better there, and that's kind of the
Mm-hmm.
opportunity now for those systems. And we won't talk about them here, but certainly if anyone's listening and wants some offline advice about which ones might actually be okay, I'm available. But it's like there's an opportunity here for that. But I think as the year progresses and people start using more AI on more teams, we're gonna see the tools step up. I'd be really shocked if by the end of 2025 there's no project share feature. Unless nobody's
Right.
using it. I don't know. Like maybe everyone's just using custom GPTs and that's the way it is. But even those could use better share abilities, right? With just a little more than just changing owners, etc.
Mm-hmm. To remix, for example, and
Exactly.
it would be really cool. Anyway, lots of ideas. The only thing that I'll add to that I sort of been thinking about a little bit is, the user experience of all of these, whether it is, Perplexity or ChatGPT or Claude or one of the many, many others, is like, oftentimes you have to go in and select which model to use for
Oh
which
my
task, and
God.
they all have these atrocious names that are either super ubiquitous, that they're so bland you don't understand really the difference between any of them, or they're like just really obtuse and super hard to differentiate without like an actual guide. Like, and if you ask the models themselves, what should I use for what, they can't even tell you. They don't know, right? They don't have that meta level sort of understanding oftentimes of which one you should be using. And this, I think, is going to be sorted out as a product issue in most of these companies by the end of this year, right? Sam Altman has even said, we're planning to, have, for example, these, sort of more, I guess you would call 3 mini, right? Like a deep reasoning model integrated into, an experience with GPT-4o mini, and, have that deep research potentially be also part of that package. So as a user, you wouldn't have to think about what model you're using. You just prompt it, and guess what? It'll choose which one to go use and return the stuff you want. That's all we're asking for, AI companies, right? And I think that's going to make it even easier and more accessible. But those who are playing around with the different types of models right now and understanding that, there will be a big advantage for when you do want to build your own custom, AI software stack for your team, right? It absolutely will be useful to still understand those differences in models, right? For things that are at a different scale, right? But I'm excited for that. I can't wait to not think about which one I'm supposed to be
Hmm.
using. Right. And this is largely also what we're teaching too, is like what to use when in which scenario. And that's constantly a moving target, right?
Totally. And obviously this is part of the guidance we give. Yeah, 100% on the model picker stuff. Honestly, I don't think even they know, otherwise they would have done this already. Like they came out with thinking, I think how recently even that happened, right? That
Yeah.
we got reasoning
Last
models,
quarter.
which, yeah, it wasn't even a year ago. And it's taken a long time to even figure out beyond the obvious, like it's better at code and math and whatever, like what is it good at, in terms of just day-to-day stuff for the 90 some percent of casual users. What is the why would they even want to use this? I don't think we've ever even gotten a definitive answer on that. You and I have a point of view on that, which we obviously give in the class and stuff, but
Hmm.
it's not obvious to anyone out there. So I think that's essential, like in terms of like figuring this out, or for the masses essentially. Like you need to just have it be like Google, like it's just one thing. I don't have to worry about it. Like, I know Google has other services, but there isn't a drop down. Do I want Google Lite or Google Good or whatever?
Right.
It's just one thing.
Yeah.
And, you're always going to have advanced stuff and APIs for developers, but yeah, just make it easy, guys.
Yeah, the irony is that a lot of these more advanced models, like oftentimes just return, for simple tasks, worse results, and it takes longer, right? And so, yeah, it's not really simple yet, and I look forward to that experience being streamlined. But it's an evolving target here. I
Yeah.
think GPT-5 supposedly is coming out. That I'm really interested to see. Is it actually a magnitude leap? Is it a rebranded, version of the current stuff? And this has been pushed out and pushed out and pushed out. And same with like Sonnet, 4 from Claude, right? And some of these frontier models. Supposedly they'll be probably launched by the end of the year here, even if they're delayed significantly. It's likely they will.
Well, if
And
they do, we will integrate them in real time
that's
on our
right.
course when
That's
it comes
right.
out. We'll be chatting about GPT-5 or DeepSeek R2 or whatever's the
Hmm.
hotness at the time.
That's right.
We'll talk about it, what it's good at, what it should be thought about in terms of like, where it fits in your
Yeah,
world.
and how you can use it and might get the best value from it.
Totally. Well, Peter, this has been great. Thanks so much for taking the time to chat and, go
Likewise.
over the plus and the minus and the good, the bad, and the ugly with AI, but also like how we're getting the best parts of that and, trying to offer it to folks in PR and media out there.
Yeah, thanks so much for coming on. I really enjoyed teaching together, Pete. I can't wait for the next cohort coming up soon. And for those interested, feel free to check out the upgrade.ai and you'll be able to find the PR course on our homepage there, even with Pete. And I know Pete has it up on Media Copilot as well.
MediaCopilot.ai. It's right there on the homepage. You'll be able to find our links to classes, and this is the first thing you'll find. So please do check it out.
Yeah, we'd love to see you there if you're watching this. Feel free to send us a note as well if you have questions about it.
All right. Talk soon, man.
All right. Later, Pete. See you in class.